This is ogforums.com Real Talk, an unfiltered, independent perspective on Acumatica Cloud ERP. My name is Tim Rodman, and I want to mention three things in this pre-recorded intro before we get started. First, thank you to our sponsors. Our first sponsor is Paya. Paya offers Acumatica users a suite of industry-leading payment orchestration tools. Far beyond native Acumatica payments, Paya enables EMV NFC terminals for countersale. They offer a frictionless customer portal through their click-to-pay solution, and they support most e-commerce platforms and point-of-sale solutions used with Acumatica, such as One Retail and AcuPOS. And best of all, omni-channel reconciliation is available for all their solutions. Our second sponsor is DataSelf. DataSelf Analytics is a revolutionary reporting solution that enables organizations to make the most informed decisions faster and easier than ever. It uniquely simplifies business intelligence, empowers anyone to build and access dashboards, and delivers critical business insight when and where you need it. Our third sponsor is Aldrich Web Solutions. Are you a distributor using Acumatica, yet struggling with an e-commerce fit? US-based Aldrich Web Solutions out of Marion, Illinois, has 2 decades of experience helping distributors find success online. Our team of experts built the integration, creating websites that work effortlessly with Acumatica. With our reputation for swift customer service and meticulous attention to detail, we are the perfect fit for distributors needing online solutions. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Our sponsors track clicks, and every click helps to support this podcast. The second thing I'd like to mention is that I'm always looking for victims. I mean guests. If you use Acumatica in any capacity, no matter how small, I'd love to talk with you. Check out augforums.com/podcast and click the link near the top of the page to learn more about being a guest on the podcast. Third and finally, I'd love to see you listed on my Rolodex. Check out augforums.com/Rolodex to find out who else is using Acumatica and read the instructions at the top to see how you can add yourself to the list. All right, that's it for the pre-recorded intro. Let's get started. Today is Friday, November 10th, 2023, and this is episode number 114. You can find related links on the episode page at augforums.com/episode 114. Today, we're talking with Debbie Baldwin about the latest news related to the Acumatica Manufacturing Edition. Hey, Debbie, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me.
I know last time we tried to connect, I think you wound up getting COVID. Are you feeling better after that?
I'm feeling much better. I didn't have a voice, so I didn't think that was a good idea for us to talk that day.
Yeah, forget about your health and well-being. It was all about the quality of the voice on the podcast. I appreciate that concern. Well, hey, before we launch into the manufacturing edition, I always like to get the brief origin story from all of our guests. Maybe you could tell us where you grew up, where you went to school, and how you landed in the world of mid-market ERP.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, let's see. I grew up in Columbus, Mississippi, and I actually went to college at Mississippi University for Women. And I grew up, growing up in Mississippi, grew up without a lot. And so you have to find a lot of stuff to fill your time, and I played basketball and softball and actually was into music. I have a large extended family, and we were get together on the weekends and play a lot of music. And one of my cousins actually ended up in Nashville as Musician of the Year a few years back. Um, so that's kind of where I came from. And um,
Can you name drop this musician of the year?
yes, his name is Tim. That's all I'm going to say. Tim May. Yeah, Tim May. He's my cousin. He's a great musician. He actually played for Charlie Daniels, and we had a lot of fun growing up. And he played every string instrument there was. So my sisters and I, we all sang, and it was just a nice, way to grow up. We didn't have a lot, so we had, family was just really important. Um, so let's see. So I went to school at Mississippi University for Women and got my degree in math. And out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do with that degree. So I just knew that I didn't want to teach. And so I went to work for this manufacturing company and started off in customer service and worked and basically was not that customer service is a boring job, but um, I just always was always wanting to do more and more and more and more. So I went and talked to the president of the company and told him that I wanted more responsibility, and he knew that I had a math degree, so I wasn't an engineer by degree, but he let me work with the engineers. And then I became a cost accountant after that. Um, at that time, we went through an implementation of an ERP, and I think I found my passion. But I didn't have the financial skills to, to be able to be a consultant at that time. So I took another job across town, and I told them when they hired me that I really wanted to do consulting work and that um, they were hiring me to be like the product manager from the customer side to do the implementation for them along with their consultants. And I said, okay, I'll do this implementation for you, but I need for you to teach me the financial side of things because I want to be a consultant. And I'll stay here for 2 years and then I'm going to move on. And I helped them do the implementation. The CEO would sit with me at night and teach me all about debits and credits. And then I called up at the time another ERP company. I won't mention the name, and said, "Hey, you need to hire me."
Wait,
Um,
can I ask you real quick on the consultant side? How did you even know what an ERP consultant was? Was it because of your experience on that first implementation?
it was because
Okay,
I was like one of the SMEs on the team, and so I worked really closely with the consultants. And I was like, I think I could do this.
gotcha. Yeah,
And
it's not like you heard about it in school. You heard about it
no,
in that first implementation. Yeah, okay, gotcha.
yeah. And I really thought, well, this could be something that I would really like to do, and I think I would be good at it, And I had been working for this manufacturing company for a long time, and so I was ready to learn. Like manufacturing, just really fascinated me, and I was ready to learn about other companies that were manufacturing as well. And yeah, so I actually went to work for this software company and implemented configurator at the first, and then I started to do ERP implementations. Um, and from that point, I was a single mother. My daughter, I was a single mom for 19 years, and she started in middle school, or maybe right towards the end of middle school, and I realized that I didn't need to travel as much. She needed me to be at home. And so I went to work in product management at that time, working for a lady that was just a beautiful woman and a great mentor. And she taught me so much, about how to treat people and how to manage. And, she was just great. And then she left the company and I ended up taking over as product manager for that product. And then it got to the point where I was working, 85 hours a week for probably 3 years, and I was like, I need a change, and that's how I ended up at Acumatica, managing the manufacturing edition, along with John Schlimmer at first, um, and then now it's just when Acumatica bought the manufacturing edition, then here I am. But it's been a really fun journey, and just being really competitive. I've had to not sit back and wait on people to make the offer, but really kind of put myself out there and say, hey, you need to hire me. I'm gonna I'm gonna help you, and it's really paid off, and I've had a great career. Hopefully we'll be at Acumatica for a while, but it's been a really great and fun journey, and I've learned a lot along the way. So
That's awesome. I pulled up your LinkedIn profile. Looks like you started at Acumatica April 2019. And I think it was shortly after that. I was actually at the JAAS, however you say it, systems company headquarters for a
oh
training
yeah,
class on the manufacturing edition. I think you were there as well
I
shortly after
was.
your start.
Yep, I
That's
sure
when I
was.
first met you. And, John Schlemmer, who has since passed away, and Jessica Gadbois wrote a great little like blog post of sorts about him, and I'll put a link on this episode page to that.
Mhm.
But just a great person, and I won't forget sitting in that class and listening to the two of you talk. And John has quite a manufacturing depth of experience, and it was sort of like for me as I was listening to you talk, I'm like, okay, Debbie has John's respect, and that's enough for me. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
knew what you were talking about. You weren't guessing at all. So, anyways, my take from first time I met you.
Well, thank you. And John, he was just so welcoming, to me, and he made me feel so comfortable asking him questions, and just kind of folded me into the loop. And it was really good to read Jessica's article, because in a way, there were some things that made me chuckle because they were so true, about him.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that on this episode page. And there's two things from your background there that for me really stood out as like common themes that I hear from people who are really good in this space. And one of those themes you said didn't have a lot growing up.
Mhm.
And I've heard that theme so many times from people who have been successful in this space. And I don't know, I think it's because my take, I think it's because this is not like a passive income space.
Mhm.
This is not like real estate where you inherit your parents' income and manage properties. Like you really have to work hard in the mid-market ERP space. It doesn't just run itself, right?
Yeah,
And so I feel like it attracts people who want an opportunity and don't have, something handed to them. And
that's
you're
true.
you're yet another example of that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and being a woman in the manufacturing world, and doing implementations, probably I'm going to date myself, but 20 years ago, then you really had to gain those, the men's respect out there on the shop floor. So that was another hurdle too, but it was all good. I learned a lot.
And then there was another theme I noticed, and that is just I'll call it the diverse background. Math major, but did a lot of music and, just the kind of not, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I didn't, like I knew I wanted to be a doctor when I grew up and I became a doctor.
Mhm.
I feel like people that are good in this space have kind of a diverse background and then they discovered ERP at some point after school, right?
Mhm.
And that diverse background, I think, is a big asset once you finally land in mid-market ERP.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, cool. Thanks for sharing that background. I always like hearing the background of all of our guests. And maybe next we could dive into the features in 23R2.
Okay.
And I was thinking, I pulled up the release notes and I thought we could just take them one by one. There are, let's see, five of them, six of them. one, two, three, four, five of them that are in the release notes. I'll just read a couple paragraphs, to kind of read it into the record, and then you could comment on anything further, a story about it, why it was important, etc., whatever. We
Okay.
can just add some more color to it. How's that sound?
Okay.
So the first feature in the release notes is Device Hub support for the print production orders form. And I'll read the first couple of paragraphs. In previous versions of Acumatica ERP Manufacturing Edition, the ability to automate production order printing was limited and inconsistent with the printing capabilities for other processing forms in Acumatica ERP. Also, this functionality did not use the Device Hub feature. In Acumatica ERP Manufacturing Edition 23R2, additional UI elements have been added to the print production orders form to support the ability to print production order tickets by using automated schedules. These elements are visible after the system administrator enables the Device Hub feature on the Enable Disable Features form. So, Device Hub. Maybe tell us first what Device Hub is and why it matters for manufacturing.
Yeah, I mean, Device Hub is just a way for you to be able to print not just production orders, but maybe invoices or anything at multiple printers and actually put it on a schedule. And then you can also, we didn't implement the emailing feature of that, but you could also email, those documents as well. And one of the things that we do every single release is I try to put something in the release that was requested on communities. Just so happens everything that we added with 23R2 was requested on communities. So this was one that had a lot of votes. And I guess I didn't realize that when you went previous to this enhancement, when you went to print production orders, that number one, you couldn't really tell it where to print. And then number two, that you couldn't put it on a schedule. So with Device Hub now, if you wanted to have, production orders, and you could filter, on it too when you set up your schedule and say if the production order starts with this letter, send it to this work center. So you could send it to different work centers if there were different printers out there, and you could actually do it at different times during the day too if you needed to. So I feel like it would be more convenient instead of instead of somebody having to manually go in and print those things every time. So that's
Yeah,
why we
especially
implemented that.
for manufacturing, which I would assume, now I don't have a lot of manufacturing experience, but I would assume that a lot of shop floors still use the piece of paper to travel across the shop floor because it's a messy environment. They have gloves on, etc. And
Mhm.
so it needs to get printed at some point, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think in the future maybe we'll try to come up with some better ways for people to see that information. But yeah, for right now, I think that they are mostly printing paper.
Yeah, that seems like a huge application of Device Hub, and I haven't used it myself yet. I'm still looking for an opportunity to do that, but my understanding is that with like a more legacy Windows application based ERP product, this wasn't as big of an issue because the client itself could talk directly to your printer and it could send the print job automated on a schedule or whatever.
Right.
But it's an issue with Acumatica because being browser based, which I absolutely love,
Mhm.
it's way better than a Windows based app. This is one downside of a browser in that because of the security in a browser, it doesn't let a application send something directly to the printer. And that's
Right.
the reason why you have Device Hub. It's sort of acting like a client that has the ability to print without your interaction, right? Is that
Yeah.
basically it? So that's a great one. Great practical feature there. All right, next one. Enabling of the manufacturing and multiple base currencies feature. In previous versions of Acumatica ERP Manufacturing Edition, you know what? I'm not going to read the whole paragraph. Basically, multi-currency multi-currency is now enabled in the manufacturing module, specifically, I guess, related to journal entries generated by the manufacturing module.
Right.
Uh, Great.
Yeah,
So you can keep now multiple companies in the same Acumatica instance that have different base currencies and still be able to use manufacturing.
yeah. I mean, if you think about it, a lot of manufacturers today have plants over in Mexico or, even Canada, and they didn't have the ability to have all of those plants be in a single tenant because of the multiple currencies. One of the things that was important for me when we were doing this enhancement is that if a company wanted to have the same bill of material, so maybe they made the same item in different plants, but it was just a different currency. I wanted them to be able to use that same bill of material and not have to have two different bill of materials based on a currency. Um, because a lot of other ERPs, if you have the same exact bill of material, you have to copy that bill of material over into a different currency. And so I thought it was important that users be able to just have one and maintain one bill of material. And it didn't matter what currency that it was in, just when they logged into the company with, say, a Mexican currency or a company with US currency, then it would just know that since you're logged into that company, this is my currency. So that was a big enhancement that we did, and it touched about 40 different screens inside of manufacturing. So, we had actually released that a few releases back, but it was in controlled release because we wanted to know, number one, know who had it because um, it impacted costing. And so if there were any issues, we wanted to get those fixed. And then I wanted to have a few customers that went live on it before I just released it to everyone. And so that's why it was just GA with 23R2. But we've had that out there for a little bit of time. Um, but yeah, that was a huge enhancement. And I hope that um, everybody can benefit from that one because a lot of companies, like I said, have companies that are outside the US.
Yeah, in terms of you check a box, hey, now we're multi-currency enabled, and the release notes is a tiny 2 paragraphs. It's probably the shortest feature listed in the release notes. Yet, in terms of level of effort, you already mentioned number of screens. I would think that this was a significant level of effort to accomplish.
Yeah, it really was. It took a lot of our development time a few releases back. So where maybe it looked like maybe we only did UI enhancements or something, or added dashboards or side panels. We were really doing some of this other stuff behind the scenes and couldn't really claim it, if you will, until 23R2.
Interesting. Wow. Well, congrats on getting to the finish line on that. That is a big deal, especially like you said, plants in Mexico or just you know, people are crossing borders more and more these days, right? Even if it's
Right,
not like a multinational, you don't really consider it a multinational conglomerate, but you're like, hey, we're a medium-sized business, and I guess we're multinational now, right? Because it just
right.
made sense to do that.
Hmm.
Um, and so it sounds like you said you don't have to choose it on the bill of material. Is it even a field that shows up? I'm curious, like on the production order, or does it just happen automatically based off of the branch on
It
the
just
production
happens
order?
automatically based on the branch.
Okay,
So if I'm logged
interesting.
into my Canadian branch, then it's going to calculate all of my costs and everything. And when I look at the cost on the item, it's going to show it in Canadian currency. And when I issue material, it's going to do it in Canadian currency. So all of that just kind of magically happens.
Very cool. So now you can run. I mean, I don't know the manufacturing space now, but I would assume if you've got a plant in Mexico or any other country, uh, you're you're going to have to report just for that company, and it's going to be
Hmm.
a separate legal entity, right? So you need
Hmm.
to be able to run the books and that currency. Yeah, I mean, how would they even have done that before?
They
Must have
would
been
have
a big
had,
headache.
yeah, they would have had to had really two different tenants, and then maybe somehow if combine everything, up at the top through financial consolidation or something.
Wow, yeah, that sounds like a big headache. So, do you have like did you get a lot of people saying thank you for doing this, or do you feel like, is it more that there was a ton of existing customers who needed this, or do you feel it's more that now there's a lot more business that Acumatica can go after because of this
Yeah.
feature?
I think it's a second because if customers didn't want to, or maybe a prospect didn't want to have two separate tenants, then they just didn't select Acumatica. So now, it kind of opens the door to new opportunities.
Very, very interesting. So tiny write up on the feature, but huge implications for the future of the Acumatica Manufacturing Edition. I
Yep.
like that. All right. Number 3 is MRP and inventory replenishment planning enhancements. So I'll give you my understanding of this one
Mhm.
and you can fill in the gaps. So I know regular Acumatica, non manufacturing edition, distribution only, has a replenishment module
Mhm.
that you can turn on.
Mhm.
When you do MRP and manufacturing, it also has replenishment capabilities. It functions a little differently, though, than regular replenishment, if I can call it that,
Mhm.
inventory replenishment. And how you chose, if you wanted to do both, like maybe you did have a true distribution replenishment scenario for some items, and you also wanted to do MRP, filtering and deciding how to only run it on certain items was quite a headache. Maybe you do it with item numbering IDs, something like that. But now you have the ability right on the stock items, even on the item classes, to have a default for which one you're going to use. Is that
Right.
basically it, or what am I missing?
Yeah, that's basically it. So we that's part of it. We we made a lot of changes. Eventually, we want to be able to sell MRP to distributors, and so we would actually call it DRP at that time. And so there, when we were looking at it and how to get there, because some people just assumed that we just didn't sell it because it was just a price list type of thing, but it was actually technically didn't work. And so when we were looking at that, then we were thinking about existing customers and if they were already using inventory replenishment and MRP today, there there is still some confusion, like what fields were being used for inventory replenishment and what fields were being used for MRP. We got a lot of support requests on that, and so we decided to kind of clean it up a little bit and set that planning method, like you said, on the stock item screen, so that when they select that, then it shows the appropriate fields under the inventory planning tab. Now we have a brand new tab called inventory planning. Um,
Ah, I missed that. Okay.
yeah, and so once you set it, then you could use both. You could use MRP and you could use, like you said, inventory replenishment. And when you set the planning method on the item, first it starts on the item class, and then it's on the item, and then I think it's on the item warehouse. Then it's very clear, that the fields are being used for either inventory replenishment or inventory or MRP. Now in the future, then we are going to sell DRP for distribution, and so we kind of genericized some of the names of the screens. For instance, the workspace is not called MRP anymore; it's called inventory planning. And then, like Regenerate MRP was renamed to Regenerate Inventory Planning. So we kind of genericized some of the names, so because we didn't want to have two different workspaces that we had to maintain, and it's the exact same code. We just have two different SKUs. We would have two different SKUs for MRP and DRP. So more to come on that in the future for DRP, but yeah, that's one of the reasons why we did it too.
And help me understand one thing I've always struggled with, not being hugely into manufacturing. If we talk about MRP, the replenishment side of it, so forget
Hmm.
about production orders and we're just talking about replenishing, those widgets that are, not really driven directly by demand, but you're just maintaining a safety stock, something like that.
Hmm.
When we're just talking about that part of MRP, if I remember correctly, and it's been a while, but there were some differences between how MRP would do it versus how replenishment would do it. And is
Right.
it that there really is a good reason for having both, or are you trying to? Is that what you mean by DMRP? Is it the old inventory replenishment will go away and it'll be replaced by one code base, or what's the thought process on that?
Well, right now, good question. So right now we wouldn't deprecate. So when we introduce DRP for distribution, then we would not deprecate inventory replenishment. The difference between inventory replenishment and MRP is that inventory replenishment is just looking at what you have on stock right now and what your safety stocks are, and and it's giving you a suggestion. So it's not phasing in anything. It's just saying you need to order 50 of these things right now. MRP is actually time phased. So it's looking at all of your demand. Let's just take production orders, like you said, out of the picture. It's looking at your forecast. It's looking at your sales orders. It's looking at your purchase orders over time. And it's telling you that, let's say if you had a sales order, maybe a blanket sales order, and if you ran inventory replenishment, it's just going to look at today and it's going to tell you to buy everything all at once. But if you ran MRP, it's going to say, well, you may need this widget on the 10th, and you may need this widget, the same widget on the 20th, and you may need the same widget. So it's giving you, suggesting orders out into the future. And depending, and you can also consolidate. So with MRP, you could say, okay, every order that I have within the week for the same widget, just combine it into a single suggested or planned order. But then after like 90 days, just lump them all into one. And so MRP is more time phased, where inventory replenishment is just today, if that makes sense. There are
Everything that's open, no matter when the demand
exactly,
is needed. Yeah. Okay.
exactly. And then we wouldn't get rid of inventory replenishment because there are some features. I think there's some features about anyway, there's some features that we don't support yet with MRP. So we would be looking at adding those features into DRP. But right now, since we don't have them, we wouldn't deprecate inventory replenishment. It's still going to stay out there.
And that, I guess, kind of hits the core of this feature, because that's I can't remember the specific scenarios, but that's what I'm remembering. There were some things that inventory replenishment did that MRP's version of it did not do, and
Hmm.
that's the whole reason why you might want to run both, and why you want an easier way to determine which items run on one versus run on the other, right?
Right, right.
Cool. And I also got to ask on that one, I can't remember. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Deborah is at Acumatica any longer, managing the distribution edition.
Yeah, she is not.
And so has someone replaced her? I don't remember.
Um, they have. She will be starting next week.
Okay.
Yep.
Where I'm going with this is, it may seem like, oh, two things: replenishment, MRP replenishment, no big deal, just two features. But in terms of how the teams operate, like, you kind of have two different teams, right? And I would think that it's actually a pretty good coordination effort to, you got maybe even two teams of developers, and you got to do a lot of coordination to make sure you're not both working on the same thing, right? Or
Yes.
I'm always impressed by Acumatica's ability to cross turfs, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And so many ERP products out there, they just wind up developing separate products essentially, right?
Oh no.
Because
Yeah.
the turf wars are so, and correct me if I'm wrong based on your experience, but that's my impression. Am I wrong?
No,
Like,
you're
from
not
what you've
wrong.
seen? So
You're not wrong.
it's impressive to me that Acumatica continues to go to market with one product. And a lot of that comes down to the teams being able to work together. So, the props to you guys for even launching a feature that crosses two different teams, right? Had to be a lot of
Yeah.
coordination there. And I love how you're looking to continue to enhance it further.
There
If I'm on
was.
the
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
there was a lot of coordination between the teams on this one. It was a really good example of us working together, and there was a lot of, back and forth on what we wanted to call things. I was a little stubborn sometimes, but it all worked out, and I think this was a really good example of two teams working together because in the long run, once we do introduce DRP for distribution, then it's going to be a lot less confusing for distributors because we took all that confusion away that manufacturers already had.
I love that. I mean, it just makes sense, right?
Hmm.
But unfortunately, the way a lot of ERP companies function is internally that just wouldn't be possible because distribution would be like, no way. Now manufacturing is going to get credit for a feature that, we mostly developed, right? So the fact that you're really all looking at it through the lens of Acumatica and not just distribution edition versus manufacturing edition, it still can't be easy. I can only imagine, but still, that's impressive that it continues to function that way.
Thank you.
All right, I got two more here. Next one is new locked status for production orders. So there's a checkbox, it looks like, on production preferences where you can lock production orders before closing. What's your summary of this one?
Yeah, so this one it sounds simple, but this one was really big because prior to this enhancement, I had a lot of customers ask if they could reopen production orders. Because what happens when you close a production order is it clears WIP. So WIP is zero, and all of your inventory, everything goes into inventory. But if somebody forgot to issue a material and the costing was wrong on the item that went into inventory, there was no way to fix it. And so a lot of companies would.
It just went to a variance, right? It wouldn't go
Yeah,
back into WIP
it
after that.
did.
Okay.
It didn't go back into the cost of the item, and if they're actual costed, that's a problem. And if it was a big item, it was really a problem. So um, we kind of had to take a step back because what customers were asking for was, I want to be able to reopen the production order. But if they did that, there could be some issues with doing that, because what if you reopened it and you just added some cost and then you closed it or added some material? Then what happens, right? It didn't really fix the inventory problem where you put the item in. It was just a lot. But you still need a way. Everybody makes mistakes, and you still need a way to fix things. So we kind of had to step back and take a look at, okay, what's the real problem? And the real problem is that people were closing their production orders, number one, to keep people on the shop floor from posting transactions against the production order. Um, because they could accidentally key in the wrong production order and add a transaction to the production order that didn't need to be there. That was the first thing. And the second thing was that uh, they needed to close it so that they couldn't add transactions, but then the cost accountant still needed to review it. So what we did is we added a way in between a completed production order and a closed production order. We added the locked status. And basically, when you lock the production order, then a shop floor worker then could not post transactions against that production order, and it gives the cost accountant time to review the production order before they close it. And then we also added a new security role for the cost accountant, and they're the only ones that can close a production order. So they have to review it. Now, they may still close it before they review it, but at least we give them the option with the lock status to be able to review it before they close it. And hopefully that will help, with some of the mistakes and being able to clean that up and stuff.
So it sounds like three steps if you enable a locked. First step, it's completed. Then second step, it's locked. Third step, it's closed.
Yeah, well, we just really added one additional. So completed kind of happens automatically. And once you issue all your material and report all of your production, then it goes to a completed status by itself. And then the next step, instead of them closing it, then they would just lock it at that point, and then the cost accountant would come along and review it and close it.
So let's say it's completed, which
Mhm.
if I remember right, it means the finished good gets put back into inventory with all of its cost on it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So it's like, say it's $130 and it's back in inventory now. Now the cost account's looking at it and they're like, oh, we missed $10. It should be, I don't remember what I said now, $10 more, 140 or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, how does that how does that happen? How does it go find the item that's in inventory and what if it's shipped, etc.?
Oh, yeah, well, if it's shipped, then there's a problem. I mean, there's already a problem, but, they could do a WIP adjustment to add the cost to the production order so that at least the cost on the production order was accurate. If the item's still in inventory, then they could, you know, obviously undo the move, like do a negative move, add the material, then put the item back into inventory.
Oh, okay, there you go. That's
Yeah,
it. All right, perfect. That's pretty clean. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's back it up and put something back on it, send it back out again. Whereas
right,
before, you probably just had to adjust the inventory cost and you never really had a way to tie it back to the production order.
right.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, cool. Last one I got here is simplified creation of a new bill of material with the edit button. It sounds like a long name, but it looks like a light feature to me. But tell me more.
Yeah, no, it's a really easy one. I think in previous versions, basically when you're on the manufacturing tab of the stock items screen, then you have your default bill of material and your planned bill of material, and right beside that is a little pencil. So if you had your default bill of material filled in, then if you hit the little pencil, then you could go look at it. Um, But some people wanted to, let's say I'm setting up an item and I also want to create the bill of material. Some people wanted to set up their item, go to the manufacturing tab, click on the pencil, and then be able to create that bill of material. Before, it would just sit there. It wouldn't do anything because it couldn't find anything. Now it'll take you to the screen and you can create your bill of material.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, it sounds like a simple feature and probably was from a programming standpoint, like the opposite of enabling multi-currency. But I love how you still pay attention to this stuff because I'm sure there's people out there who do this on a daily basis and they're like, oh, you just made my life so much better because it's a much smoother process now. That makes sense.
Yeah, we're trying to look at usability, and we're really paying attention when we add new features. To make sure that we're not introducing a lot of extra steps. Even though the locked, we did introduce extra, but it was necessary, um, to do that. So we are looking at ways to improve the usability of the product, and I think once we get the new UI released, then we'll continue to look at the screens because I think we'll have uh, a lot more flexibility on what we can do, with the screens at that point.
Yeah, I recall back in 2019, sitting in that room at Joss headquarters. I just right off the bat, you were already talking about we should add more side panels, more
Yeah.
out of the box dashboards. I just love the way you think of. I love how Acumatica builds all sorts of cool tech. I just have always wished they would spend more time to utilize the tech they already built, and you totally think that way. So even if we look at prior releases that you've been in charge of, you've done a lot with side panels and dashboards, and it sounds like same thinking here, where you're
Hmm.
looking to utilize tools that you have at your disposal and just need to be built out into better real world applications of them.
Right.
So maybe talk to us about as you're looking forward to 2024 R1, how do you go about deciding what's going to land in that release?
Yeah. Well, well, first, it's really hard as a product manager because, I've been there. I've worked in manufacturing for a long time, and I know their pain. And every time they a lot of times when they bring up things on communities and stuff that they would like, I'm like, yep, that's a really great, idea. And I wish I could say yes to everything, but we just have limited resources. So I have to really take a look at, first I do look at communities. So I look to see, which ideas have the most votes. So I am looking when I'm considering, like I said, I try to put one thing in every release at least that comes from community. So that's the first thing I'm looking at. The second thing is support. So if we have support issues, and sometimes, support issues are bugs and we fix those, but sometimes support issues are things that are like, mm, yeah, well, it just really wasn't designed that way. Um, and sometimes I can get by with fixing like support issues that are bad designs as bug fixes, but sometimes I need a little more thought than that, um, because we want to make sure that we're covering all the use cases. And so we're looking at those two, like what are people complaining about that really aren't bugs, that or maybe change requests that could improve the user experience. So we're looking at support like volume drivers, and then maybe
Can
how.
can I ask you on the support thing? So
Mhm.
actually, before the question, let me give you the when I go into support mode, my my number one goal is let's get them to mark this as a bug. And the
Yeah,
dreaded response from support is whenever they
working as
say it's
design.
functioning, it's working as designed. You're like, no.
I
So
know.
my question to you is, do you have a way to review the breadth of support cases, or do they have to individually get escalated to you for you to see them?
Um, they don't have to get escalated to me. I, along with Ed Griffiths and Angie Rowley, every 3 times a week, then I only see the ones that get escalated. Let's just say to the development team. Um,
Okay, for them to give an answer of working as designed
yes,
or bug.
yes.
Okay, so
So I
you are
see.
seeing what I would consider the breadth of those
Yes.
requests. You're not just seeing the ones that are truly marked as bugs.
No, I see the ones that come through to our team. We review those every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So, I mean, I can give you a good example, like some costing things where, yeah, I mean, so I think there's some places where overhead doesn't calculate the same for tools or machines, let's just say, and they really should, but I can't really say that's a bug because it's working. But should we make them consistent? Yes. And so I have, items in my roadmap to look at, and it needs to be specced out because it needs to be done right. We don't want to introduce additional problems. And so, for me, that's the deciding factor. Like, could this be, if I were to quote, fix this, could it possibly introduce something um, that would be a breaking change? And if it would, then maybe I need to back it up a little bit, and it needs to be a change request. So those are the things that I look at.
That sounds like, is this low hanging fruit, or if messing with this might upset the whole apple cart
Yes.
sort of
Or
thing.
would I
Okay.
break somebody else that maybe thought this
Right.
was a feature?
Right, right.
Yeah.
That sounds like a quite an impossible position to be in, and I would imagine at some point it's like the buck stops here, right? Debbie
Right.
decides, but it sounds like you're taking input from a lot of directions, and I have no problem with the buck stops here. Where things become a challenge is when the buck starts here, right? And it's
Right.
this like this you're breathing your own you're you're inhaling your own carbon dioxide, right? But it doesn't sound like you're doing that. You're well ventilated in terms of where you're getting your input from.
Well, that's today. It can change on a daily basis.
Yeah, you carving out an entire hour for this podcast is still amazing to me because the volume of stuff that you must have to go through must be quite a bit. So thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. No, I mean, that's why I do this job, is for for you and for customers, and that's why I love Acumatica too, because we are so customer focused, and it's really a breath of fresh air coming from other ERPs where they honestly just don't care.
Have you noticed more of an what I would call an engineering mindset at Acumatica, where there is this thinking of let's do it the right way?
Oh, absolutely. Um,
I've noticed that too.
yes, and we're like our team is new. We've really built the manufacturing team from the ground up. We have a couple of people, from the JOS, but they were a really small team, and so we're just constantly trying to improve our processes and our communication across just our team. And it's been really fun actually to see our team grow and where we were, what 2020, 3 years ago, and where we are today. So um, I can't wait to see where we are, say 5 years from now.
That's really cool. Well, looking not quite 5 years ahead, what about looking forward to 24R1? Is there any
Yeah, I got some good
spoiler
stuff.
alerts you can give us or your priorities for you?
We have some, well, of course, the UI. We have to get the UI done by 24R1, and we've already been working on. We already have like our first pass on all the screens, and now that we're just going back and doing a UI review on those. But some really cool things coming. We are gonna introduce DRP. So we're gonna sell MRP to distributors. It will be called DRP with 24R1, and along with that, we'll also support kits with MRP or DRP. So that's
That's
been
it. That was one of the differences. I just remembered.
yes. Yeah, so we are going to support kits with DRP and MRP with 24/1. So that's really cool. I'm really excited. That's just been something that a lot of customers have asked for since I've been here. And then the second thing is I had been kind of putting this enhancement off because it was a really big enhancement, but we kind of broke it into two pieces because I felt like I could stop the bleeding right now, which is overlapping operations. So if you have, let's say, on a production order today, if you had operation 10, 20, 30, and say you're going to produce 10 widgets, then you had to complete 10 widgets on operation 10. And then let's say you only completed 5, it would only allow you to complete 5 on operation 20 and 5 on operation 30. It wouldn't let you complete operation 10 and operation 30, say, at the same time. And if you had a flat bill of material, then maybe you were doing some painting in one station and welding in another, and you wanted to be able to complete those 10 units at the same time. So it stopped you from doing that. and then we also didn't have a way to plan for that. So the scheduling piece did not look at overlapping. So most of the complaints or most of the requests that I was getting was, hey, I just want to be able to report my operations out of order. And I said, well, but if I do that, then I've got to do the scheduling too. And a lot of people said, well, yeah, eventually you need to do the scheduling, but what we really need is to be able to, report the operations out of order. So we broke that up into two pieces so I could get the first part done, and that will be also released with 24R1. So they'll be able to report operations out of order
Cool. So the goal will be out of order, not necessarily concurrently yet, but at least out of order.
concurrently. Yeah,
Oh,
concurrently too.
both. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, cool.
And then let's see, you got UI, we have kits, we have reporting operations, and then we're doing some enhancements to MRP. We're putting a time fence on MRP. Right now, it just runs wide open forever. So if you had orders out there, sales orders out there 2 years from now, it's looking way out there to try to tell you what you need to buy and what you need to make. So we're adding a time fence so you could say, hey, just look at the stuff that's out there for 6 months, and plan that. And then we're also doing things. I think there was a request for MRP not to look at inactive warehouses. And it wouldn't, like, you could, there's a way to make it not look at inactive warehouses, but you had to go and uncheck. Let's say you had 100 locations in a warehouse, you'd have to go and uncheck every one of those locations. Now we're just saying that if you make the warehouse inactive, then MRP is just not going to look at it. So you don't have to go and uncheck all those things. So we're doing some tiny enhancements to MRP. Yeah, I mean, there's really a lot of good stuff that we're looking at for the future once we get this UI completed. We have a lot of specs that we've written already. We just need to, be able to get to them now. So we have a nice backlog of things like a master routing, which people have been asking for, um, drag and drop on the schedule board. Um, but able to do the drag and drop on the schedule board, then we had to kind of tighten up that integration between the parent and the child production orders, because you wouldn't want to be able to drag a child in front of a parent if they were linked. So we had to tighten up that, and so we have a really nice spec on that. So there's a lot of good things coming. I'm excited.
Now, you've mentioned the new UI a couple times. Can you educate me? Because this is probably like, oh, everyone knows this, but I don't necessarily know this. You said by 24R1, you're looking to be on the new UI. Does that mean the same thing as .NET Core, or are those two different things?
Oh no.
Do you know?
Don't ask me. I'm not technical at all.
All right. I
Um,
think it does, but I
I
don't know for sure. But
think
it
you're right
sounds to
too.
me it sounds to me sort of like multiple base currencies are like, yay, we're on the new UI. It's a ton of work, but it's like going to be 2 paragraphs in the release notes, right?
Right. Yeah, and then the good thing is, once we convert our screens, then we're going to support both the classic UI and the new UI for some time, because we've got to let our ISVs, they'll have to redo all of their screens, and if anybody has customizations and they're using the old screens, then they'll have to redo those. So
Right,
we'll support both the new and the old, but
right.
I think first pass, the screens will pretty much look a, a lot the same. We're not making a lot of changes. We're just getting them up to the new .NET Core. Is that what you said? um,
Yeah, it's like the plumbing in your house, right? I
yeah,
mean, you're not going to have corroded plumbing anymore. Will you see it? No, but it's a lot of work to do it, and it sets you up for the future.
exactly. But then we'll start to take a look at the screens and improve the usability, once we get those moved over. So I think it's going to be really, really good. And customers will have a lot more flexibility too, because they can hide fields, and they can put their user defined fields on the screens, and it's just, I think it's going to be really nice. I'm excited.
Yeah, I love the demo on it, and actually, it's on the sales order screen currently in 23R1 even, you can turn it on, and
Hmm.
just the ability to right there on the front end, it might even be I think it's even user by user, you can arrange fields on the screen the way you want to see them and add user-defined fields instead of having them buried on the UDF tab or the attributes tab.
Right.
Yeah, it's a quite a big difference. So just saying we're on the new UI is short, but what that'll bring to the table is significant.
Hmm. Great.
Well, very cool. Debbie, thank you for taking so much time today. I know that you have quite a lot going on, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking through a lot of details related to the manufacturing edition.
Well, thank you for having me.
Any other final things you can think of that you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
Um, no, just, thank you, for inviting me. I've actually wanted to do this for quite some time, and I guess if I could, if anybody's out there listening, if you have any suggestions on things you want to add to the product, just make sure you go to communities and um, add it as an idea, because I am looking. And if you're out there on communities, you see me, I'm very active. I want to make sure that that we have happy customers. And I know how important it is, when you're using the software. to be able to, streamline your processes. And you definitely don't want to have something that is causing you a hindrance. And I totally get that because I worked out there in manufacturing for so long. So, but anyway, I have an open door. Just Debbie.Baldwin at Acumatica.com.
And I'm glad you mentioned the community. So community.acumatica.com, you mentioned the ideas area, which is where you make product suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
Are you also chiming in on just forum posts where people just
Yes.
ask questions?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of two different areas, right? One's the, I don't remember the name, forum area. One's the ideas area. Like one, you can vote on product suggestions. The other one's more just a discussion area. But it
Right.
sounds like you're looking at both areas.
Yeah, I get a notification every time somebody asks a question out there, and if I can't answer it or Angie can't answer it, then we get it answered and we put the answer out there. So
So you're reviewing all the support cases that go to development. You're getting notifications on the community. Your inbox in the last hour must have grown quite a bit. So I'll
I
let you
haven't
get back
looked.
to it.
Okay.
Thanks again for
All
taking the
right.
time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of ogforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening and take care.